Hello. In our last lecture, we were trying to describe the major human resource function, the scope of personnel management, and also the definition of personnel management, various activities what one can include under the personnel management. Today, we will expand on manpower planning. As you know, manpower planning is one of the important activities of human resource management, personnel management. Understanding the requirements of the organization, understanding the future tasks, and defining a plan of action to meet those expectations has been a major task of personnel management. In the 80s and the 90s, issues were coming around technology, but in the late, particularly last 10-15 years, the issues are coming around attrition, aspirations, changing lifestyles of people, issues of retention. So let us try to understand what is this manpower planning and how can we go about it. Manpower planning has been defined by different people, but in the nutshell, let us understand what is that they are trying to talk about and what is that they are trying to explain. But by the end of this session, you must have learnt and understood the following: the concept and meaning of manpower planning, the process of planning, and different techniques for forecasting. We have already talked about a little bit about planning and forecasting in my previous lecture, so that I will limit the scope of planning and forecasting with respect to human resource management. So the major definitions, not that every definition is useful or acceptable, but look at some of these definitions. According to Coleman, human resource or manpower planning is the process of determining manpower requirements and the means of meeting those requirements in order to carry out the integrated plan of the organization. That is, we are thinking manpower planning in terms of a demand plan and a supply plan. Demand of what is required by the organization and a means to meet those expectations through a supply plan. And similarly, if you see the according to E.W. Utter, human resource planning is defined as a process by which an organization should move from the current manpower position to its desired manpower position, both in terms of the quantity and quality. So the planning is considered as a kind of a process. That means you continuously make changes, corrections within the organizational activities and practices, and you meet the future requirements. So systematically you evolve the required focus. So in other words, one is a matching process between demand and the supply. The second one is an evolving process. So through planning, management tries to have the right number and the right kind of people at the right place and the right time, doing things which result in both the organization and the individual receiving maximum long-term benefit. I think this is the essence of manpower planning. The right number, the right kind of people, and also they are at the right place, and they are also available at the right time, and they do the things which result in the maximum gain for the organization as well as for the individual. So manpower planning is essentially the process of forecasting an organization's future demand and making sure there is a supply of the right type of people and also in the right numbers. I think this being the core of manpower planning, it is only after the manpower planning that human resource management department and others can initiate other processes like recruitment and selection. So according to many, human resource planning is considered as a subsystem in the total organizational planning and overall human resource management. And when you see this, the why we require a human resource planning, every organization has one or more of these needs. The shortage of certain categories of employees or a variety of skills despite the presence of general category employees. For example, in a machine tool manufacturing company, the paint technologists are in short supply. Earlier days, the systems analysts were in short supply. Today, the secretarial staff, particularly the personal secretaries to CEO, there are not enough good people. In other words, you may have number of people in the organization, but to meet some specific roles, either because of the technology or because of the demands or because of the technology intensity. So, there could be many issues which makes shortage of certain categories of employees. So, the human resource planning aids in terms of meeting and getting those specific skills at the right time. Another important thing is the changes in technology, marketing, management practices, etc. So, the consequent is need for new skills and new categories of employees. We have seen some organizations recruited large number of mechanical engineers, but suddenly the focus changed from mechanical engineering to electronics. So, that means you require people with electronics background. Marketing have changed. Earlier the marketing was a kind of a specialist job, but today one who manufactures also must support, explain the same concepts to the customer. So, that means you require people with technical background with also having sufficient product knowledge. Otherwise, the marketing efforts are not very successful. So, that is the reason why the changes in technology and the conditions require new breed of people, new skills, and a good manpower planning meets, understands some of these expectations. The changes in organization design and structure affecting manpower demand. This is because of the promotional paths where people acquire new skills and there is a lot of delegation of power. So, any of such things would lead to that there are short supplies in certain levels, and then one need also to see how to create more opportunities for people at the lower levels, and those of you who promote must occupy some specific roles so that they can contribute. All these changes again demand either induction of certain skill sets at certain levels or planning a process where you fill in all the positions over a period of time in a systematic or through a systematic induction and developmental programs. The other important factor is the demographic changes, like the changing profile of the workforce in terms of their age, gender, education, etc. So, as you try and see, people acquire more qualifications and they move out of some of the roles because they want to contribute, they want to make a difference using some of their background and the experience. And we feel at points that there are shortage of people, or you do have excess of people who should be redeployed, or sometimes you have to re-educate the people because you want to create an inclusive kind of a group at different levels. So, that means you have to pick some right people, educate them at the lower levels to build a capacity in them to move up to at higher level positions. All these initiatives would put its own kind of a demand on manpower planning. Similarly, the government policies with respect to reservation. So, if you do not have some people, you have to induct some people to maintain the rosters and also making sure that there is a fair play. And similarly, the child labor, where if you think that certainly today we are making sure that nowhere these kinds of things are acceptable, and similarly improve the working conditions. And you require somebody to enforce, somebody to supervise set of standards. So, that means you create newer roles and then make sure that there are people in the organization to monitor the compliance. And we also see the labor laws affecting the demand for and supply of labor. Suddenly you see this the control on the shift hours, and also where the individuals are not prepared to go beyond or cannot go or extend their number of hours, and similarly pressure from trade unions, where they negotiate for not only the number of hours of work, but as well as for the premium rate for the extra hours done. So, some trade unions are very cooperative for the existing employees to stretch some hours, and there are many may not support such initiatives. Then the politicians and the kind of pressure which they can put for some of the sons of the soil, or asking people to be supporting some of the social movements, or it could be the general number of working days available to an organization through the whatever is happening around this political climate. And the next important factor is introduction of computers and the workplace automation, robots. As we are seeing, more and more manufacturing activities, more and more service activities are influenced by the technology. The technologies which contributes for volumes, technologies which contribute for the speed of the organization. Hence, the manpower planning becomes extremely an important activity, and we are talking about the manpower forecasting. Manpower forecasting is the process of estimating the future quantity and quality of people required. So, the manpower forecasting starts with organizational long-term and the short-term plans. Organizational long-term and short-term plans need to be understood, and then that need to be converted into the annual budget, and then it should be translated into activity levels for each function and department, and then you see the increased function, increased responsibilities of different departments can be met with the existing people, or you need to get more people. So, the good forecasting is the first step. So, it basically to quantify the jobs necessary for producing a given number of goods or offering a given amount of service. So, that means we go by a detailed analysis of how the existing people can meet the requirements of the organization. Similarly, determine what staff mix is desirable in the future. So, if do the forecasting and to see what would happen to these people in the coming years, then you will see what is the probability of people remaining at the same level, what is the probability of people who have to move up to the next level with responsibilities, how is that they will continue in the few positions based on their potential as well as their contribution. So, we need to assess appropriate staffing levels in different parts of the organization so as to avoid unnecessary cost. So, that means who are the people who can take more responsibilities, where are the issues of short supply, where are the skill sets where you think there are heavy workloads. So, all these things will help in understanding the future structure, future aspects of the organization, and a good forecasting would help doing such things. Particularly prevent shortage of people where and when they are needed most. For certain tasks, certain activities demand that require some X number of work experience. Unless they have an exposure, unless they have some experience, it is not easy to do such kind of a task. It could be the gearbox assembly. So, it may take about 8-10 years of work experience with a senior, and then only they will be able to do. And similarly, the consultants who implement some of the IT solutions, or the people who do some kind of a work of architecture. So, all these people had to have that necessary experience, and the number of years of experience and the kind of tasks which they have handled in the past becomes very critical. And as we try and understand what kind of people are required with what experience, that will also help to the future how we can maintain them and what is that we need to do with them. And monitor compliance with particularly the legal requirements of with regard to the reservation of jobs. As you know, a number of our organizations, 22.5% or little more will go for different reserved classes, and also there are ex-servicemen, people with called as the KM Kashmiri migrants, then you also have reservations for different groups of people, being the sports person or the person who is already working in the organization. So, it all help in terms of forecasting to the future about what kind of manpower one need to have. So, very clearly to the importance and objectives of manpower planning can be summarized in terms of the following: to recruit and retain human resource of required quantity and quality, making sure that they are doing the right kinds of things within the organization, to meet the needs of the programs of particularly expansion, diversification, acquisitions, etc., so that there are people who can meet those future challenges which can come in terms of providing new services to the customers or use of existing facilities in a better way. That is, some organization working in single shift may get into the double shift or 3 shifts, or they may expand the activities from one region to the other, or diversification. If they are into some core activities of say construction, they may get into schooling, or they may get into some more supplies of building materials. So, it could be a kind of a diversification in related areas. So, the manpower planning will help to meet those requirements and also foresee the impact of technology, to foresee what is going to happen into the future by the current technologies and also on the future technologies on work and existing employees, whether it will reduce their work in terms of quantity and quality, or will it increase their physical efforts. So, we need to see some of those things and then expect whether it will save manpower or whether it demands a new kind of manpower, and then working out plans how to get and how to deploy these manpowers or to develop the existing people, to improve the standard, skills, knowledge, ability, discipline, etc. Manpower planning also helps in terms of how training activities need to be conducted. Unless you create some extra, some buffer, the existing people cannot be spared, cannot be sent out, or cannot be allowed to get into the classroom kind of a training, because it may come in the way of their work. So, how do we do that? How do we increase the standards in terms of reducing the number of hours of work if some people are overstretched? So, it is these things, and also sometimes it is the discipline. So, if you think that if the people are not giving to their best of their capacities, then you have to see how do you do this. Sometimes it is through outsourcing or through giving some work to the existing employees, but to be done outside the organization. So, these kinds of contingent plans also can be done very effectively with the appropriate manpower planning practices, and also to assess the surplus or shortage of human resources and to take measures to correct those things. In certain areas there could be excess people because there is maybe the orders are not there, or there are this moment or in next couple of months they may have the less demand for their activities, so that you have extra people. In certain areas, maybe particularly the January, February, March, you will find the production years when they come to an end, suddenly some groups feel there is a shortage of human resources, and such volumes or the change in volumes or change in demands both positively or negatively affect the availability or shortage of manpower. So, one need to understand this cycle of changes and then plan towards those aspects. The other important thing is to minimize imbalance costs due to non-availability of human resources, particularly of right kind, right number at the right time. As we are talking about, sometimes people are there, work is not available, but there is high demand for the work, but your people are not prepared or they do not have the capacity to deliver. So, one need to correct these things and make sure that the people are available at the right time, and when people are there and when there is no work, it can affect their motivation, and in turn it also affects the climate of the organization, and definitely to make use of the existing manpower. And similarly, when you see to estimate the cost of human resources, as we go along in any organization, cost of human resources will increase. So then you must try and see how to get more and better out of the existing people, and also to foresee the employee turnover. That means, we try and see, are there any resignations, are there any aspirational problems where people don't like to continue in the organization, or are there any chances where the kind of people you get, they are not able to meet or cope with the organizational demands. So that means you have to make some arrangements for having some kind of a buffer. First is to minimize the turnover, and then in case there are in case the vacancies come up, then you have to make sure that you meet those vacant positions through getting appropriate people. And to maintain congenial industrial relations, good management union relations by maintaining optimum levels and the structure of human resources. If people don't have responsibilities, that is, if they don't have enough challenges in the shop floor or in the kind of work what they do, then it is likely that they will get into other activities. And so it is in that sense to make sure that the right people are there, right challenges are provided, right recognitions are provided, then you do have better and good industrial relations. Absence of that can lead to conflict, confusion and differences. So when you see this human resource planning, it must consist of the following essential steps. One, analyzing the organizational plans, both short term and the long term plans. Short term plans of next 6 months to a year, and when we are using the word long, it may be from 2 to 3 years time. So analyzing the organizational plans, basically it gives an idea of how some of the existing activities will be continued to the future, what are the new technologies are going to be inducted, what are the new areas in terms of geographical diversification is likely to happen, or we will also see, are there any acquisitions, are there any mergers of which is forecasted. Another is to look at the demand forecasting, which I mentioned to you earlier, the overall human resource requirement accordance with the organizational plans. What are the new kinds of jobs are likely to be in demand, how some of those things can be defined in terms of the quantity and quality of work. Another is the supply forecasting, making sure the available data and the information about where are our people, how are they coming, what are the sources through which they are coming, and whether are we getting the right kind of people, are we getting enough people. So quantum of human resource inventory and making an analysis of that and seeing to the future whether you are going to be comfortable, are there any strategies required about the supply side. So then existing the net human resource requirements. So the net human resource requirements means it is the existing people versus then you will see what is their actual performance. So that means there is a potential and there is actual. So estimating the net human resource requirements would demand that kind of an analysis of the performance of the existing people. In case of future deficit, forecast the future supply of human resource, but make sure that from all sources that we are able to see the reference to the particularly plans of other companies, what is that they are going to do, and are we going to compete for the same human resource, are there any uncertainties in attracting and getting those people on board, are the labor market situations are very comfortable where trained and well educated people are available. I think these are the choices when somebody gets into the forecasting. Similarly, in case of future surplus, then we have to see the plan for redeployment. That means we have more people than what is required. Then one should also see retrenchment and layoff. Normally retrenchment and layoff to be done as a last resort, but one will also see how and in what possible manners existing human resource which are not required in certain departments can be redeployed. And also one should plan for recruitment, development, and also the internal mobility. So, if future supply is more than or equal to the net human resource requirement. So, in other words, the situations of surplus, the situations of demand must be analyzed, and then one need to see what could be the best strategy. So, one also has to plan for or modify the forecasted numbers, because then sometimes you see that the future not understood very clearly. So, there could be some inadequate with reference to some future things. So, best is to keep a monitoring plan. So, in summary, what we are talking about is human resource planning consisting of 3 important steps. The one in terms of assess current human resources, then we are seeing the determining the future needs, and also to develop a plan to meet these needs, and we are taking care of the requirements of the HR. The tools for human resource planning essentially starts with job analysis. Job analysis, we will be talking at different levels. Yeah, it helps for recruitment, it helps definitely for human resource planning. So, the job analysis defines the jobs with the form and the behaviors necessary to perform those jobs. So, that means systematically we will understand all the tasks, all the activities, and then we try and define what are the positions, what are the duties, and what are the responsibilities. I think that is what the job analysis is all about. From job analysis, we try and go for the job description. Job description is a written statement of what a job holder does, how the job is done, and why it is done. So, all the 3 things will help in terms of getting into the very clearly what is the demanded from this job. From then we move to the job specification, that the minimum acceptable qualifications. That means we say this job can be performed by a graduate in commerce. So, or we may say that a graduate engineer is required, or we may say this job can be done by anyone, but who knows minimum writing. So, that means you write minimum acceptable qualification an incumbent must have to perform a given task or a job successfully. From job specification, once we have all that, then we try and look for the forecasting. So, the factors of which Manpower forecasting depends are external factors as well as the internal factors. As I mentioned earlier, the external factors could be the competition, the foreign and the domestic, economic general climate, and the laws and regulatory bodies, how is that they are demanding, the law enforcements, and also we are talking about the changes in technology and some of the social and demographic factors. Here the most important thing is the kind of a competition, the general competition in terms of who and how many of your organization competing for same kind of talent. And the foreign kind of a thing, it has come in some of the machine tool sector. When people are trained and the skilled workers, they are always in high demand, not only in the local area, but also at the national level, but also at the international level. So, some of the best trained the machine tool skilled employees, not only there is great demand in India, but maybe in Malaysia. And similarly, the construction supervisors and the engineers, they are not only in demand in India, but also maybe in Gulf countries. The next important thing is the economic climate of inflation, the economic climate of stability, the economic climate where organization can foresee the future comfortably. The laws and regulatory bodies which insist upon the set of basic working conditions, I think that is known, but they may also impose upon the how much of the work can be done through the contract labor. So, such regulatory things, or abolition of night work for women employees, and already creating an issue in the BPO and the IT sector. So, the regulatory bodies do bring in some of the new perspectives, sometimes new laws, which either suddenly create an increase in manpower or a decrease in manpower. And certainly the changes in technology, the communication, manufacturing and the office technologies, all are productivity driven, and they try and reduce the human effort and also demand newer skill sets. I think that would make an internal exercise much more complex, and then one need to see how to meet those expectations created by the technology. And the social factors such as the expectations of the people, aspirations of the people, and also the opportunities what they get to move out and acquire some new skills. I think these are all the things which will pressurize as a kind of an external factor. These are not exhaustive, but as some examples only. The internal factor starts with the budget and budgetary constraints. So, in other words, how much you are prepared to pay to attract some of the best of the talent. So, that means with the existing wages, you may not be able to retain people as well as you are not able to attract people. Then you also have to see the production levels. Some organizations work with lower capacities, that is the time they lose. Similarly, they have a high capacity where people are stretched or they experience the feeling of burnout. Again, there are issues of retention, issues of getting best out of the people. And the third important thing is the organization thinks about introducing new products and services. And as you introduce new products, then you have to see what kind of people and how many people, and the services in terms of supporting at the customer site or having service center closest to them. Many of these decisions again create. So, it is basically an internal decision, and definitely organizational structure in terms of more delegation, more responsibility, more promotional opportunities and things like that. And the last is important of the manpower planning is employee separations. Employee separations because of the superannuation, the age with which people retire, or the natural separations in terms of the death, things like that. Then you have the resignations of the employees for a better career opportunities. Then you also have the separations because of the disciplinary actions of dismissals and termination of the employee for misconduct and misbehavior. So, these internal factors and the external factors push together about what is the best method of doing this. So, the organization generally have to think in terms of what techniques, what practices, what sophistication one need to adopt or one need to follow. The organization generally follow more than one techniques. So, that means you cannot one cannot say this could be the best, but the techniques are, if you see the managerial judgment, or it could be the ratio or the trend analysis, or it could be the work study techniques. So, methods of techniques, if we start analyzing if we can see as we are mentioning several of the things in the past, Delphi technique, flow models, and also the other techniques of forecasting. And in all this we will spend some more time, but the most critical thing is the managerial judgment. Particularly most of the small scale and unorganized industries cannot have a very systematic data bank of manpower information and job analysis. So, that is the time where they go by their intuition or their past experiences and then see who can meet, how many of these people can be expanded to take some leadership positions and things like that. So, that is the time where the organization resort to basically a managerial judgment approach. That means that roughly they calculate, they foresee yes we may require another 10 to 12 hands into the next quarter or the next year, and they try and adopt set of the short term methods. So, the forecasting horizon is not more than 6 months to 2 years. And when you are seeing about the managerial judgment, in terms of this method, the manager or supervisor who is very clearly well acquainted with the workload, efficiency, ability of employees. He is able to think to the future workload, also future capabilities of the employees, and then able to decide on their careers what opportunities are available, and then he also identify the future human resource requirements. But the managerial judgments are important, and several times we have seen time and again good managers and good hunches, good picture of the future, whatever they have, if it is shared with others, will always help in doing good manpower planning exercise. But the point is, they are more guided by the hunches, they are more guided by their thumb rules, but not necessarily they would have taken all the factors into consideration. I think that is the difficulty of this typical managerial judgment. In ratio, the trend analysis, this what what one can do is, the ratios are calculated in terms of the number of jobs, number of activities, or with respect to the workloads. So then we talk about, based on the past data, if the increase in turnover or increase in the volumes, we can talk about in terms of number of employees. So number of employees of each category can be expressed, and that also indicates the workload and the number of activities required to be performed. Or so the production levels can be converted into, or the sales levels can be converted into, or activity of the workload can be converted into number of employees. Number of employees can also be segregated into number of skilled employees, number of semi-skilled employees, number of people who have to support these activities, or it is in terms of the indirect employees. So in the ratio of the trend analysis, we try and convert each of these things into number of employees, and also can be defined with respect to the skill or with respect to the levels of the organizational hierarchy. So the future production levels, sales levels, activity, workload are estimated then also with an allowance. Sometimes you have to allow for time for training, sometimes we assume a kind of a learning curve. Then we also think, yes, when we make changes within the system, yes, some people have to take at least 2-3 months initially to learn the methods and the various aspects of the job. So that means you have to put some more people and then seek to maintain the productivity levels or the production levels. And the ratio analysis and the ratio trend analysis, what we try and do is look at the future, and then we calculate also into the future. I think if we grow at 10% level, if we grow at 15% level, so we build that kind of a scenario, and then assuming that the current manpower is available to the future, and then within that we will see how do we meet the demand for, or the demand for the forecasted increase in production or increase in services, and then estimate what is the future requirement of the people. So in other words, the ratio and trend analysis helps in terms of set of baseline and what additional things are required. When you look at the work study kind of a thing, it is much more to do with the productivity. So these techniques are more suitable when the volumes of work are easily measurable. So that means you are able to say so many pieces to be produced. I think existing people, we can think of, like we have 20 people and they are able to produce some 15 pieces. So if we have to really get about 30 pieces, how many more people to be deployed directly and how many to be indirectly. So that means we try and see with the standardization, with the existing people, with their age and effort and with the kind of capacities what they have, what is that they do, and if you are able to state in terms of per hour production or per week production, then it becomes easy to express in terms of what is the total output required. But in this method, total production activities in terms of all the units are estimated, and then you convert that into see how many man hours required to produce or perform, and then we also try in terms of the how many man days required. So, the workability of each employee is estimated in terms of manpower after giving due weightage to absenteeism, holidays, rest, etc. So, that means we assume in a year so many working days available, even in a particular working day so many number of hours are available as which could be counted as productive, and in the productive hours this is the kind of output. So, we have to see to the future means you look at how many days are available, then calculate in terms of how many productive days are available. Within that we see how many manpower or how many employees are required to perform some of those things. So, work study techniques helps building the view from the bottom. So, we systematically study and we also try and combine with the ratio and trend analysis and come with some kind of a future estimate. So, establishing the ratio between the two categories, so the same logic is applied and then the future numbers are worked through. In Delphi technique, the point is that it is named after the ancient Greek oracle at the city of Delphi. The Delphi technique is a method of forecasting personnel needs. In other words, the set of experts come together and the different divisional heads, divisional the technology experts. So, then they try and estimate what are the personnel needs. So, then based on their past experiences, so they try and see this is what is going to be. So, the HRP, so the human resource professionals expertise are used, then then you try and summarize various response. In other words, you poll in terms of the number of requirements, number of jobs, and then how many people are required. So, once you generate the first level of report and then the findings are given back to the same experts, and then experts make a correction, okay, plus or minus. I would accept this kind of a position that you do require in order to increase our turnover by an X amount or have our established the establishment in 2 more places or have our offices in another 30 places. So, they come with some kind of an approximate number based on their past experience, and then it is projected to the future, and then the Delphi technique can be used in multiple ways where people can revise, revise their estimate based on a kind of a consultation process. So, the experts are surveyed again after the summary feedback is given to them, and then a common validation process is adopted. So, 2 to 3 rounds of this kind of an expert's opinion and working through, we will see that some kind of a convergence coming in, and that convergence, that agreement will be taken care of. I think this is how the requirements to the future, and if all the divisional heads of the organization, all the specialists are included in this kind of an exercise, that also helps some kind of a common framework of building consensus in the organization. So, in the absence of this active involvement of the experts, Delphi technique is not easy to work through. Then we will also have this kind of a flow models. Flow models are frequently associated with the forecasting the personnel needs. The simplest one is called the Markovian model. We expect that at each level there are set of people who are coming in, the set of people are moving out. In the moving out situation, they are promoted to the next level, they continue to work at the same level. Some of them also get demotivated, demoted, or they may also go out of the organization. Demoted means they are moved from their higher level to the lower level, which rarely happens. So, determine the time that should be covered, because there are shorter lengths of time, or sometimes it is the long time. But if you see, if you are able to look at next 10 to 12 years, I think it is a good enough period where either people would change from one level to the other, maybe once in 2 years or once in 3 years, and then similarly the kind of changes which is coming in the system. But in the flow models, what we are talking about is the time horizon, which depends upon the length of the HR plan, which in turn is determined by the strategic plan of the organization. If strategic plans are not very clear, and then the HR visions and practices are not futuristic, it is difficult to see what should be this kind of a time plan of these flow models. But one can establish categories, also called as in kind of a states in which employees can be assigned. So different points need to be identified. So these categories must not overlap and must take into account every possible category to which an individual can be assigned. So that means that the complete flow of the manpower need to be understood. So in terms of that, we take so many trainees. The trainees spend about 1 year of induction process. At the end of induction, they need to be put as the first level workers or the first level engineers in 10 departments or 12 departments or 15 departments. From that they have to move up, so they work for X number of years. In between they are changed from one task to the other, but then they are evaluated after the end of 2 years. So at the end of the 2 years, either they continue into the same position, or if they are bright and very good, then they are moved to the next level. If they are exceedingly performing well, then they are picked up for future leadership positions or put them onto a fast track. So there are many of these decisions are taken in that kind of a flow model, and then you assign a kind of a probability for each of the actions. So that means you will assume that I think I will promote about 2% of the toppers in each category for a fast track kind of an approach. Then at least bottom 5-6% are in, they put on a slow track for through their investment in their training and development and things like that. And at least 1 to 10% of the employees are thrown out. That means they are given suggestions to move out or move away from the organization. So there are many of these things. One can assume a value and a probabilistic value, and then one can build this kind of a flow model to see in next 5 years, next 10 years, how the organization would look like if we have the same set of assumptions. So we can think of annual movements, also called amongst the various periods, and then arrive at what best could happen. So the way the states are defined as absorbing or non-absorbing states, and then you think of the losses which include because of the death or disability, which can be expressed as a part of the accidents rates, absences, resignations, and the retirements. So all this can be put as a kind of value. So estimate the probability of transition from one state to another based on the past trends. So then demand becomes a function of replacing those who make a transition. So each transition point would ask for. So this Markov analysis is very advantageous because it makes sense to the decision makers. So it's also you are able to project to the future. So they can easily understand whatever is underlying assumptions. And according to many, you will also get some results which are likely to the closest to the realities of the situations. But the disadvantages are there is a heavy reliance on the past data. So and also the kind of the assumptions we have made with respect to the probability of similar things happening. So it may not be so accurate in periods of some turbulent changes coming within the organization or outside the organization. So accuracy in forecast about individuals is also sacrificed to achieve accuracy across groups. So that means we may not take some strong individual differences, individual expectations. We may treat all individuals as same, all departments as same, or we may try to forecast across the organization. However, the flow can change within the departments, within the divisions of the organization, and throwing some kind of an imbalances. There are mathematical models. They are also used in human needs and forecasting, but there are other techniques in terms of the new venture analysis, particularly organizations are contemplating to get into some newer activities, related activities when they are getting into the diversification. As you see the new activities, one need to forecast what are the things to be done. In the new venture activities, so planners has to estimate HR needs in line with those companies, organizations that perform similar operations. So that means a construction company moving into an IT business, so then immediately you will try and see what is the kind of turnover in IT sector, where do you source some of these people, what is the supply side in terms of how much effort or time is required by the organization to train some of these people and put on to the task. So we need to estimate how many people are likely to be available for selection, when they will be available, what is that we need to do so that there is some set of skills are developed and so that they can become productive to the organization. And then what is that the other organizations have done, and so we do some kind of a benchmarking to get into the new things. So it could be the petroleum company that plans to open a coal mine, so you have to estimate. So the future employment needs and also determining the levels of other coal mines and what they do, and then put that kind of things. So the other techniques one can also illustratively mention are the judgmental methods. So that means you use intentions and opinions as data. So people try and see what is going to do for the future. How is that you are going to get your people on board, and how difficult it was in the past. So then you try and create that kind of an understanding and an impression to see how one can look into the future. Similarly, sometimes the survey opinions in the organization. Many of the surveys have revealed, I think the people have come through referrals, have stayed for much longer and also have contributed better. So that means you need to see how can you get more productive employees through the employee referral schemes. Sometimes you also have to use a good number of senior managers to come together and then take a view of what is happening, and then also suggest a method of meeting some of those requirements of the organization. Sometimes we also talk about the projective methods. We start with the informed ideas and build on them, part of the brainstorming. So the group focuses intensely on the given problem. So that means the particular skill sets of the organization, or one of the IT companies they were talking about, I think there are more Java people, but they want to have more .NET. So that means you are trying to see, okay, how do we do that? Should we retrain and reorient existing people, or should we get some more people from the outside, or should we take some young guys and then build them onto these skill sets? I think these are all part of the brainstorming which could lead to a set of conclusions. So as you know, the brainstorming, it generates many ideas rapidly. It's really difficult to evaluate which idea was good or anything, but then you have to go step by step, taking all the ideas and then building some algorithms or some flowchart around those ideas, ruling out some possibilities, accepting many of the alternatives, and then can see to the future. Another definitely a projection method is very clearly the extrapolation method. You project past and the current trends into the future. So as typically we go by the kind of a time series analysis. So you will see whatever the kind of growth what you had in the past, the kind of ups and downs you had in the past, that can be taken as a kind of a value, and then we project these details to the future. And most organizations adopt this. So that means if the last year's growth is about 30 to 40%, and then you try and assume a similar scenarios to the future, maybe with plus 10% or plus 20%. So you also build some kind of a scenarios. Then we also have that kind of a causal models, where very clearly try and build this some kind of an econometric methods, or with the help of a multivariate statistics, you try and take several factors of the past and then put them into the future. how for the future scenarios would look like. In segmentation methods, you take particular strata of the organization and then try and see how many years it is required to get people at certain levels, and whether it is horizontal recruitment or a long term development of the existing people to meet those expectations of the future. Sometimes you also make sure that you to develop what we are talking about, a bootstrapping method, is develop an explicit model from the judgmental forecast of an individual to attain more consistent performance. So that means you will rule out, yes, I think we would only go by the strategy which has worked in the past, and then you continue to believe unless things are going to prove in a different way. So far what I am trying to talk to you is about the concept of manpower planning, where the effort is to understand the demands of the organization and meet the requirements of the organization in a systematic way, and having the right persons at the right place at the right time and doing things which are required for the organization. And the planning steps could be simple steps of understanding both the requirements of the organization, understanding the factors which create such demands, and on the other side to see what are the internal factors which contribute and change the supply plans. So, the supply and demand, once it is understood, then we move on to the aspect of forecasting. There are different techniques of forecasting, and how much sophisticated one should do, it depends upon the context and the requirements. Definitely in the next class we will have a close look at the selection process, how we recruit, how we get some of the best of the talents to the organization, what are the selection methods, what are the selection procedures. But good job analysis, and from the job analysis getting the good job description, and then from the job description identifying the specification in terms of who or what kind of manpower is required, and linking this requirement of the manpower to the overall goals of the organization. Both short term and long term goals will give a fair idea based on the existing level of performance of the people to see how to recruit, how to retain, how to develop the future human resources of the organization, so that organizational performance can be ensured.